Hi, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading, and this is an original Civil War era Remington model 1863
Zouave.
12,501 of these rifles were manufactured by Remington between 1862 and 1865 during the American Civil War for the Union. Government records listed them as Harpers Ferry Pattern rifles, and they have similarities to both the model 1841 and the model 1855 rifles that were manufactured at Harpers Ferry prior to the Civil War, but are those of a unique pattern. Whether or not any of these rifles saw any use in the war remains unclear and debated. 1863 is dated on the lock and the barrel. The left stock flat is marked with a boxed inscription and cartouches HDJ for Henry D. Jennings and BH for Benjamin Hannis. HSL for Homer S. Lathe. Inspection initials are marked on the left barrel flat at the breech. This rifle is a 58 caliber with a 33-inch full round barrel. I don't talk about military arms very often, but sometimes when something like this comes through the Rock Island Auction Company, I think it's fun to sit down and go through them. While it's not nearly as ornate or as artistic as some of the civilian pattern arms that we see in the muzzleloading era, talking about military muzzleloaders is still important. I'll admit, I'm not an expert on this era of arms by any means. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of research done about these military arms. So this will be a general overview of this Remington
Zouave.
But I hope that inspires you to maybe dig a little deeper and check out some of the other extensive research that has been done by historians and muzzleloading enthusiasts for years. First up, I want to take a look at this rifle as a whole. It has a few hallmarks that really date it for the 1860s era. More, we have the stamp on here. We know through documentation what kind of rifle this is. But when we start talking about the transition from longer barreled arms to the shorter barreled arms like we see here, especially those used in the American Civil War, there are a few key features. The first is going to be this large military style percussion lock here. It's a very big, bulky lock. You'll notice that we've lost all the external lock components that we have on a Flintlock. We just have a big, heavy, military style hammer here. I say military style because you have civilian pattern arms in the same time period that are going to be a little bit different. This entire lock face really, this lock plate and the hammer here are going to be a little smaller, maybe a little more ornate. When I say military style here, I just mean notice the size and the girth of this hammer here. It's both wide and thick as it comes out of the lock and comes up to hit the nipple here. You also notice we have a really short barrel in comparison to early military style arms and civilian arms of that same early era. Because we have a change in both the industrial infrastructure that is making and developing powder and projectiles, we also have a shortening of these barrel lengths. You'll notice a couple other carryovers from the earlier muzzleloading eras as well, especially in military arms. We have two barrel bands here. So while this is a later period rifle for the muzzleloading era, we're still holding this together with these barrel bands. This is something the military adopted very early here in the United States and continued to carry this through really up to and through, in some respects, the smokeless and cartridge era. So much like we would see on an earlier even percussion rifle back into the Harpers Ferry style flintlock rifles and even back to the Charleville musket that we've talked about. We have springs here that hold these barrel bands to the stock to keep our barrel assembly and our stock tight together as we're using this arm. But it makes it very easy to compress this spring and pop this barrel band forward so that at night while you're in camp or just through your military regiment, you can keep your muzzleloader clean both on the interior and the exterior. On the underside here, up at the muzzle, we have a large brass nose cap to protect the end grain of this walnut stock. And then underneath here, we have our ramrod and our ramrod channel. So even though we're getting closer and closer, and even at this time we see some cartridge arms being used, we still have our ramrod in this muzzleloader. So the underside of our barrel bands, at least here in the front, become our first ramrod pipe. And back here, at our rear barrel band, you'll notice that our ramrod goes into the wood before we get to this rear barrel band. So it's not necessarily acting as our entry pipe, and that is the same position our entry pipe would be in on an earlier style muzzleloader. On our front barrel band here, we have our sling swivel, and we have our rear sling swivel back here on our cast brass trigger guard. Like many American military arms, and I think military muzzleloaders in general, we have a single trigger here. We don't have any option for a set trigger. This large brass trigger guard here is a very durable, very bulky, very tough trigger guard. Very necessary for when you're handing this out to military members as they go on campaign. On the underside of our trigger guard here, you can see we have one screw at the tail end of the trigger guard, holding it to the stock. And then up here at the front end, just forward of the trigger, we have the tail end of our tang bolt going all the way through our stock here and then holding the trigger guard to the stock. Really simple way to do that. We see that being done more and more as we advance through the eras in muzzleloading. It's a means to make it cheaper, make it simpler, or make it more affordable, I should say. Cheap has a negative connotation to it. But by holding the front end of the trigger guard in with our tang bolt, we make the disassembly of this rifle to fix it or clean it a little bit easier, especially when you're in the field. Come back here to our butt stock. Here in the 1860s, we really start to see a shift, and really I think before in military arms when we think about it. But we come back to this butt stock and we're starting to see a shift away from the drop in stocks that we see in earlier eras of muzzleloading. We're starting to see it more of a straight line here across. We still have some drop here, but it's not nearly to the extreme that we see in some like more long rifle era muzzleloaders. Again, we're going back into, we have a straighter grain all the way through this stock and making it more durable, making it tougher when on campaign. Along with that, you'll notice here at the bottom that we don't have any toe plate on this rifle. So this muzzleloader itself, we don't have any flat face here on the bottom. We have a nice curved face. This radius travels all the way around the stock. Makes it a tougher, bulkier stock. We come back here into our brass butt plate. And again, when we compare a more civilian style butt plate to this military style butt plate, with a very thick, very bold butt plate on here. It's held together with a really large screw and screw head here at the top, just behind the US stamp. Gone is the ornate patterned patch box. We just have a simple patch box here, no exterior fins on the side of the patch box, held together with 3 large screws. We don't even have a release for this patch box. We have a small indent in the butt plate, which allows a fingernail to get underneath our patch box lid to open it up, as you see. I want to make a note here too, that compared to some of the earlier rifles we've seen, this brass patch box is thick. It's 1/8 of an inch thick, I would say, compared to some of the almost paper thin brass furniture that we see in earlier eras of muzzleloaders. Again, going back to some of the industrialization and the infrastructure behind the making of these components. It's much easier and much more affordable now to have access to thicker brass sheet to make these materials out of. Coming up through the wrist, we don't have any thumb piece or any wrist extensions. We do see some figure of the grain here in the walnut stock. Nothing to indicate that it would be a fancy stock by any means. Very common for what we see in military arms. Jumping up here to the action or the lock area, our barrel tang is a simple barrel tang with a single screw head, single bolt like we covered earlier, going down into the trigger guard to compress this whole section and keep it all together. Our lock is a standard large military style percussion lock. You can hear this as we set it on half cock and set it back to full cock. You can hear those knocks as that goes in. When you compare those knocks to that of a civilian arm or even an earlier muzzleloading arm, the contrast is pretty stark. This is a deep kunk. Whereas some of the more ornate civilian style arms are going to be more of a click, a little as that pops into place. Here at the tail end of the lock, we have 1863 stamped into the lock plate. Then forward of our hammer, we have a Federal Eagle with US stamped below it. Just forward of that, we have Remingtons, and then Ilion, New York below the Remingtons. Forward of our, just behind our front lock bolt here, we have an L stamped into the plate. The interesting thing about this sight system is that our rear sight is adjustable. So as it sits here, we are sighted in or adjusted for 100 yards, as indicated by the 1 on the front or the user-facing face of the sight. We can flip that up to our sight marked 3 for 300 yards. And then we can lastly pull up our last sight face for a sight marked in at 500 yards. On this lock side face of the barrel, we also have our bayonet lug out here at the front. Flipping around here to our side plate side, you'll notice that we don't have an actual metal side plate here. We have our side plate mortise or a side plate face, but that side plate in this era and for many rifles has been replaced with two large lock bolt washers. Inside each washer, we have two slightly convex lock bolt heads. Just forward of our top lock bolt here on the barrel, we have the steel mark and the HSL mark. Just to the rear of our top lock bolt, we have the stamped inspection marks for HDJ, and in line with our front lock bolt, we have the stamp for the BH inspection mark. I know that there's a lot of back and forth, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of research about this era of rifles, about the Zouave name itself and the history that goes with it. I can't get into that, I can't speak to any of that, but I do think that it's a neat example of 1860s era muzzleloading and of military arms. This rifle itself is in great condition looking at it. I mean, just really well done, really well handled and preserved over the years. So if you'd like to learn more about this or any of the other muzzleloaders that we're looking at here at the Rock Island Auction Company, I encourage you to visit the Rock Island Auction Company on social media. I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.